Okay, I think we're on. Let's hope. All right. So I'm going to go. Is this where I want to go? No, that's not where I want to go. Dang it. Yeah, here's where we are. All right, so somewhere on here I've got the review sheet. Okay, no, not that dang review sheet. Here we go. There it is. All right. So I'm going to start here, and then I'll pull up the Civil War PowerPoint. Like I'm going to just talk about these right quick. Kind of a big review sheet, right? All right, so to Harrison. So we're getting Harrison elected. His first campaign slogan was Tippecanoe or and Tyler too. So it's like the first campaign slogan in history. So remember, he was the first Whig president. He was the guy that, gave the speech and died right quick. The other campaign slogan was log cabin and hard cider. So you remember, he had this Democratic newspaper editor, basically called him a hillbilly or redneck or something like that, by saying all he wants to do now that he's retired is live in his log cabin and drink hard cider, which was like manly beer kind of stuff. And the Whigs said, well, that's a good thing. They adopted that as a campaign slogan because it's saying that the Whigs had their own common man president. All right, well, he gets elected. He wants to show that he's a tough guy and a well-informed guy, so he gives the longest ever inaugural address. Gets sick, and the result is he has the shortest presidency in history. All right, Tyler opposed the American system. So he had been one of those Whigs that was a Whig in name only, in the sense that he hated Jackson, but he didn't believe in, the strong national governmental support economy that Henry Clay believed in. So the American system had been a tariff, transportation improvements, and national bank. Tyler was against that, vetoed a third national bank. So the Whigs kicked him out of their own party. Only president ever be kicked out of his own party. Okay, so along comes this idea of manifest destiny that we're supposed to spread from sea to shining sea. Let's see. Polk is the presidential candidate who, in 1844, who believes in that slogan. And so he's an underdog, but he defeats Clay. One of his campaign slogans is 54, 40, or 5, saying he wants to get all of Oregon all the way up there to Canada. He ends up backing off from that and settling for Oregon only at 49 degrees north. Okay, and because he doesn't want to fight both Britain for Oregon at the same time that he's fighting Mexico for the Southwest. Cause of the Mexican-American War, we got the manifest destiny thing going. What's really on Polk's mind is California, which he wanted both for the farmland and for trade with China. And so you got California, you got manifest destiny. He picks the fight over the size of Texas. You got this disputed territory between the Rio Grande River and the Nueces River. And he sends old rough and ready Zachary Taylor in the disputed territory, and finally Mexico attacks. So that kind of results in the Mexican-American War. Abraham Lincoln, so he goes to Congress and says, American blood has been shed on American soil. So Congress declared war on Mexico. All right, the two heroes of the war, Zachary Taylor, old rough and ready, who wins. He's the hero of Buena Vista, so he wins a battle in northern Mexico, but he can't make it all the way to Mexico City. So old Fuss and Feathers, Winfield Scott, is the war hero that captures Mexico City. Abraham Lincoln, a Whig congressman, introduced the Spot Resolution, so he was anti-war. And the Spot Resolution says, I want to see where American blood was shed on American soil. All right, I don't even have the treaty in there, do I? Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gives the United States all the Southwest, so that's the treaty that ends the war. Okay, so let's bring in a little bit of PowerPoint stuff to this thing. So you got the Wilmot Proviso. I think it's going to be right here. So there it is. So there's the territory that we get from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And so he says we're not going to let it spread. Slavery will not spread to the west. It passed the House because the House has more northern power. But it didn't pass the Senate ever because there's the same number of northern and southern states in the Senate. So South has just as much power in the Senate as the North does. So it never does pass the Senate. All right, so there's plan number one about what people do about slavery in the new territory. Let's go back to the review sheet. So you're going to the 49ers, so you're going to have the gold rush there. All right, so gold is found close to San Francisco. The 49ers, there's 80,000 of them. They're coming into California looking for the gold. And the number's important because that's enough people where California is going to have to decide. It's going to become a state to have to decide what to do about slavery. All right, it was the wild, wild west. So life in California was wild west, very high crime. Wasn't a lot of ladies that came with the guys. But, you know, the bigger question is going to be whether or not it's going to be free or slave territory. If we go back, oh, yeah. And what I need to, someplace, what if I do this? Would it make it bigger? Yeah, so let's make it bigger again. So on the video, we can see what we're doing. I believe we see better if we make it bigger. All right. Okay. So gold rush life, that's the wild, wild west. And the only people making any money are like the people who are selling stuff to the 49ers, Levi Strauss most famously. All right, if we go back, Civil War, the Compromise of 1850. So I'm going boom, 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 boom. All right, there's the compromise. California's a free state. Utah and New Mexico, let's change that right now. And I'm just going to put this question mark. You don't have 60,000 people in those two places. And these are territories here, Utah and New Mexico. So you just don't know what's going to happen there. All right, the other part of the compromise is this right. So the first slide is the most important part. California, free state. Really, no slavery is going to be in the Guadalupe, the Mexican Cession area. All right, there'll be a fugitive slave law, so that's going to make the North mad. No slave trade in Washington, D.C. Texas loses a little bit of land. So that's the 5 parts of it. All right, let's check the review sheet. The Fugitive Slave Act. So that was aimed at Harriet Tubman. She had gone back to the South 19 times, isn't that our number? And rescued 300 slaves. There it is. All right, including their parents. It's more of the principal thing of the South. There were 4 million slaves. So slavery itself was not being challenged that much, but it made, the planters in the South real mad that she was able to rescue all these slaves, and all these slaves were running away. All right, Anthony Burns is the next thing on the review sheet there. And so the Fugitive Slave Law said that Northerners had to help return runaway slaves. And this guy gets captured in Boston and gets paraded through the streets of Boston. And so that made the folks of Massachusetts really, really mad. All right. Stephen Douglas is going to come along. So he's going to believe in popular sovereignty. He wants to get elected president. And so he thinks he can get elected president if he gets a railroad coming out of Chicago. But he lets the people of Kansas vote on slavery. So he introduces the Kansas-Nebraska Act. We go down, down, down. So there it is. All right, and if you look right here, it's above the Missouri Compromise line, so it's repealing the Missouri Compromise. All right, so then they vote. Let's see. So that's more on life in the gold rush, gold rush, gold rush. There's got to be a bleeding Kansas slide. There it is. All right, so they vote. Both sides claim that they won the vote. So the pro-slavery folks cheated and formed a government. The anti-slavery folks just set up an illegal government, so then they're fighting each other. So that's bleeding Kansas. John Brown's first time we see him sets up, so he's hacking up pro-slavery folks at the Pottawatomie Creek massacre. These are not even slave owners; they're just pro-slavery. But he believes God has appointed him to, to smite the slave owners, to end slavery kind of by himself. See what we got. All right, Uncle Tom's Cabin. So it's the anti-slavery book, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Let's see where she's at. I think she's going to be up. Yep, there it is. Anti-slavery books focus on the Fugitive Slave Act and the evils of slavery. Really influential political book. Lincoln famously gave her credit for starting the war. You know, it's very religious in its language, the biblical language, so it's showing the influence of the Second Great Awakening. All right, let's go back. Okay, so then you got Brooks, Kane, and Sumner. All right, so Sumner, we kind of know him. He's going to make this, and there it is, the crime of Kansas speech. He's going to end up being the radical Republican in the Senate during Reconstruction. And Brooks caned me from South Carolina. South Carolinians sent a lot of canes to Brooks, and both of them were supported by their sections. There's a special election to replace Brooks. South Carolina elected Brooks to replace himself. And even though Sumner was over in Europe recovering, they reelected him and just left his chair empty. All right, back to the review sheet. The Dred Scott case. So Dred Scott is the slave who sues for his freedom. He got taken north. His master died, so he thought he was going to be free, but it went to the Supreme Court, and he lost because he wasn't a citizen. The 14th Amendment's kind of going to be the anti-Dred Scott amendment, and he's the property of his owner. And Taney, the Supreme Court justice, says you can take your property wherever you want to, and he declared. And so, really, the Dred Scott case is declaring the Missouri Compromise, the Northwest Ordinance Compromise of 1850, at least the California part, unconstitutional, making it, Abraham Lincoln believed, impossible to limit where anybody took their slaves. So that's going to lead to the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Lincoln and Douglas are debating each other in 7 different places. The most famous thing that Lincoln says is that the Dred Scott case gets rid of popular sovereignty. If you can take your slave anywhere you want to, that includes into anti-slavery territories. Douglas's Freeport doctrine that he enunciates here in Freeport, Illinois, is that there's going to be no slave laws, that an anti-slavery territory can refuse to pass the laws that help a slave owner, especially if like a slave's running away, you know, they won't help him get his slave back. All right, let's go where we are. Let's see where we are here. All right, there's Freeport doctrine, John Brown again. So we're going to John Brown, and there he is. He's raiding the arsenal at Harper's Ferry, 1859. The idea is to start a slave rebellion. He's white. Some people were writing some pretty good stuff. He was an abolitionist, but he's this white abolitionist. But he's going to give guns to the slaves. It was a bad place to have a slave rebellion because it's in Western Virginia, the mountains of Western Virginia, where there weren't many slaves. So it didn't work out. They caught him. They arrested him. They put him on trial. He was calm at the trial, so he was brave. So they hung him. And he was seen as a martyr in the North and a terrorist in the South. There's that propaganda there, you may recall, where the artist draws a slave baby hugging John Brown. It never happened, but it shows how he's seen as a hero in the North. All right, let's see what I have down there. Just a review. So then you got the election. You got to elect Lincoln. All right, Lincoln got the nomination because Seward, higher law Seward, was seen as too radical. So Lincoln's going to make Seward Secretary of State. There's 4 people running. Lincoln gets 40% of the vote, but he gets all the northern votes, and those are the populous states, so where that's your money makers in the Electoral College. So even though he's got 40% of the popular vote, he still gets the majority of the electoral vote. So then, boom, you got secession. South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and then working your way to Texas there. All right, let's check our review sheet, see if we're where we need to be. Scoot down this way a little bit. All right, and so then you're looking at, you're looking at the Civil War here. All right, and so I go right here, and we are comparing, what the sheet says is let's compare presidents. So where is it? There it is. All right, so Lincoln appointed quality guys to his cabinet. He wasn't as impressive a resume, but he had more national power, and he kind of had these personal qualities, and we kind of know some of the poetry in his speeches now. Jefferson Davis had a better looking resume, but he didn't have much national power, and he's kind of a micromanager. All right, so if you go back to the review sheet, so that's the comparison of these 2 guys. So then the question said, who's the president and vice president of the South? So we're working our way up. And the president is Jefferson Davis, and the vice president is Alexander Stephens from Georgia. All right, the first great speech, that's the first inaugural address. That's where he's talking about, hey, let's listen to our better angels of our nature, our conscience. And he's arguing that slavery is illegal. All right, so then along comes Fort Sumter, which Lincoln decides he's got to resupply. It's run out of supplies. Now, he only sends food, but that's enough to get the Confederates to fire on the fort. It surrenders within 2 days. Nobody got killed. In the actual battle, there's a cannon backfires and a donkey, and a person gets killed after the battle's over. Okay. So there's Fort Sumter. All right, so then you go back. The effects of Fort Sumter. And there's the effects. Lincoln calls up 75,000 more troops, so then you get the upper South states seceding. There they are right there. Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. So that's the two effects of Fort Sumter. And then what Lincoln's really concerned about is the border states. Those turquoise states up there, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, also the western part of Virginia. You had that little quip by Lincoln that he's got to have Kentucky, and then also he's really concerned about Maryland, because if Maryland secedes, Washington, D.C. will be inside the Confederacy. So the result of this is he doesn't say anything bad about slavery early on, because he doesn't want to anger those border states. All right, so there you have that right there. Let's check back with the review sheet. All right, and hey, I'm going kind of fast. This process makes me a little nervous because I'm never actually sure that the video is going to make, and then I don't want to make the video and turn out that it doesn't work out, yada, yada, yada. So I'm trying to come in at like under 40 minutes for making the video. If it goes over that, the video gets awful hard to make and send out. Okay, advantages. All right, so you're going to advantages of each side during the war. All right, yep. Okay, boop, boop, boop. So there it is. More and better, right? They've got better military leaders. They're better with guns. They believe in what they're doing. They're defending their home, and they feel like they just got to keep on fighting. If they fight long enough, Britain's going to help them, and the North's going to get tired of it. All right, the Northern advantage, more of everything that you need in a war. Everything. Look at that. Everything. That's more of a Southern thing to say. Let's see if we can put a Y in there. All right, so 3/4 of the wealth, the railroad. They've got the blockade. They've got a lot more people. Over time, the soldiers get better at fighting. Finally, he's going to find his general. He's got that anaconda plan to put the squeeze on the South and hurt the South in terms of the resources. Okay, the advantages. Where was it? Okay, so then we're going to soldiers' problems here. And I believe that's the very next slide. So there it is. Boredom and disease. Twice as many people died from disease as from battle. Remember, Abraham Lincoln's son died of disease. The doctors, if you got shot in the upper body, you're going to die. If you get shot in the leg, they're going to cut it off, and you might not die. You have 70% survival rate. The nurses in the North, you got Clara Barton. That's her right there. She's going to be the founder of the American Red Cross. Dorothea Dix, who had worked with the mentally ill in the age of Jackson. Sally Tompkins is going to be the nurse in the South. All right. Okay, let's go back up here and check our review sheet. All right. And it says divided Europe. So Europe is divided because the elites in Europe are rooting for the South, but the masses were anti-slavery and read up Uncle Tom's Cabin. And so Europe itself is kind of divided. All right. So then you got those two ships. The Trent was sailing to Britain to negotiate for British help in the war, and it kind of got impressed by Union soldiers. But it was a British ship, so that makes Britain mad, causes tension in Britain. The Alabama was made in Britain, but then guns got put on it in other places. So there's guys aboard the Alabama. So you basically have a lot of British ships that are being used to fight against the Union and to help the Confederacy. And the British kind of have deniability because the guns are not put on it till later. All right. Okay, so let's go back to the review sheet. See what we have. All right. So funding the war is the last non-battle thingy, and then we get to start fighting the war. All right. So let's see. So that's a good thing. Rich man's war, poor man's fight. He's suspended in habeas corpus. That's a good thing to know. There's the funding of the war. North had more money. They had a stronger government, so they got more of a power to tax. So they've got the tax, they've got the tariff, they got excise taxes. So the North taxes more, has to print less money, the greenback. So they've got inflation, but not out of control inflation. So they're better able to fund the war. The South is a Confederate government that has less power to tax. So they're going to print a whole lot more money, and you're going to have a whole lot worse inflation, 9,000% inflation. I'm going to get rid of this right here. I have no idea what that means anymore. So I'm going to get rid of it so that we're not staring at that, trying to decide what that means. Okay, so there's the review sheet. You got funding the wars, and so now you got battles. All right, so I'm back to the PowerPoint. All right, and let's fight some battles if we can. So there we go. The two bull runs. The South wins both times. The first time, Stonewall Jackson and his guys do the, they stand like a stone wall, and so they win. Second time, it's going to be Lee winning, but both times, these are these early Confederate wins in the East, the Eastern Theater. So there's McClellan. So he's a good trainer. He's overly cautious. So the Peninsula Campaign, rather than marching straight to Richmond and attacking, he tries to pull this end-around surprise attack deal, and it takes too long, and it doesn't work, and he's defeated by Lee. So Lincoln fires him for the first time after the Peninsula Campaign. All right, review sheet. So that's McClellan's problem, 7 days. All right, so the Anaconda Plan is what we have. So let's see if we get it. There it is. So it's called the Anaconda Plan because it's like a snake, putting the squeeze on the South. So you got the blockade. So that's going to keep supplies from getting in there, cotton from Britain, and from Britain from helping out the South. And, when the Merrimack fails to destroy the blockade, thanks to the battle with the Monitor, the blockade pretty much holds. All right, capture Richmond, that's the capital. Capture the Mississippi River, that's cut the South in two. Free the slaves, that keeps Britain out, and it also causes a lot of soldiers to have to go back home to the plantation. All right, so then you start cutting the South in pieces, and you attack them everywhere. That's what Grant does at the end of the war. Cold Harbor, the Wilderness Campaign were a couple of examples of just kind of chasing Lee around places. All right. So then Antietam is next. Antietam is going to lead to the Emancipation Proclamation. So we're going right there. So there's Antietam. Antietam was in Maryland. Lee, that's in Northern Territory. Lee believes he'll get British help if he wins Northern Territory. All right, he drops his plan. That's his first major screw-up, his first big blunder. And so McClellan's guys, McClellan has been rehired. And he barely wins at Antietam, but he didn't chase Lee back down to the South, so he gets fired again. All right, it is after Antietam that Lincoln issues this Emancipation Proclamation. First, he says, you can still come back and I won't set the slaves free. Of course, they don't. So Emancipation Proclamation was January 1st, 1863. He doesn't set them free in the border states, Kentucky and Missouri and Delaware and Maryland. Because he doesn't want to make them mad. He says the South ought to set their slaves free, but the South considers itself a different country, not a rebellious area. All right, but the effect, it gives the North something to fight for, keeps British out of the war, and it also keeps, encourages slaves to run away. So there's the three effects of it that we see. If we work our way up. Three effects of the Emancipation Proclamation. All right, let's see if we can finish this war out. So the African-American troops fight, 180,000 African-American troops. By the end of the war, they're making up 10% of the army. If they got captured, they were treated more brutally than Union soldiers, white soldiers captured as POWs, and they were executed at Fort Pillow by Confederates under Nathan Bedford Forrest, who went on to become the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. Let's see. All right, so then you got Gettysburg. All right, Gettysburg's coming. Go back to the review sheet. You got the return to the pattern. Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Lee's winning again. He's winning again at Fredericksburg because Burnside's just kind of a terrible general that attacks the middle. It's kind of the Union version of Pickett's Charge. Attacks the middle of the Confederate lines. And so then he gets fired. And then at Chancellorsville, Lee wins again. But Jackson's out doing recon after the battle's over and gets killed by friendly fire. Gets killed by his own guys there. So kind of loses his right-hand man. All right, so then Lee's going to try to go north again. Pennsylvania. Get that help. It's a 3-day battle. He's flanking first 2 days. Cohen likes to point out in fourth period that Longstreet, there was a Confederate general that's forever telling Lee, don't do this picket charge thing. It's going to be a disaster. But he does it every way. Anyway, they go straight up the middle of the Union lines and practically all of them get killed. And that's your last of the turning points in the East. You know, there's never really any chance that the South's going to get any northern territory. All right, so I got that Gettysburg Address there. 6 months later, it's at the cemetery. New Birth of Freedom, to me, is the most important part of it. All right, in the West, Grant's winning. So he's got a general in the West, winning at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. Shiloh was fought at a Church's 2-day battle, bloodiest battle of the war up to that time. Vicksburg is the city on the Mississippi River they lay siege to. And it surrenders on July the 4th. And remember, the people of Vicksburg ate all the animals. So when the Union soldiers went in there, they didn't hear any dogs barking or anything like that. All right, let's check our review sheet, see if we're on schedule. There's Vicksburg. So then you go Sherman. All right. Hey, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to breathe. Hey, match some of that stuff up. Or fast forward if you want to. But I've been going pretty straight for, pretty hard for, and, to where I'm speaking incoherently. Okay. All right, let's get Sherman going. All right, so Sherman took Chattanooga, then he goes down to Atlanta, basically straight down the I-75 path. He burns it. Atlanta was a transportation center. Then he's going all the way to Savannah. And he's destroying everything on the way, breaking the will of the South. He likes Savannah. It's pretty, so gives it to Lincoln for Christmas present in 1864. Then he goes to South Carolina and starts tearing everything up again because South Carolina is where all the trouble started. Lincoln gets reelected. He's not expected to win. McClellan's running against him, but news of Sherman winning gives him a landslide victory, and then he pushes the 13th Amendment through while he's waiting to get inaugurated for the second time. Let's look at it. Okay. All right, so we got to surrender, and we got to do our reconstruction chapter. All right. Second inaugural, all the theological stuff. Malice towards none, charity for all. Firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Lee gets chased all over Virginia. Finally surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. All right, Lincoln to celebrate is going to the theater. Booth kills him. Booth is the actor, and the thinking is he's going to bring down the whole government. They're going to kill not just Lincoln, but Seward and Johnson and Grant. But Lincoln's the only one who gets killed. Secretary of War Stanton, the guy who's going to be fired by Johnson, violating Tenure of Office Act, famously says of him, now he belongs to the ages when he dies. Okay. All right, so then you got that. These are all good things to know. So these are all the same folks, right? The Northerners, on behalf of the African Americans, the radical Republicans in Congress are trying to change the South. The national government is going to make the states help out the freed slaves. Does freedom mean the same thing to African Americans and to whites in the South? Certainly does not. And the question, if you, Lincoln says if you just treat it as a rebellious area, you can go easy on them. But if it's a conquered area, the radicals say you got to be tough on them. All right. You got multiple emancipations. The jobs of sharecroppers and tenant farmers. The black churches and the black colleges were created. And then here comes the Freedmen's Bureau. All right, Freedmen's Bureau providing basically many things that African freedmen needed, however, not the land. They needed land more than anything else. Then they could have been independent Jacksonian farmers. All right, let's check this against the review sheet. Freedmen's Bureau. So there we are. All right, so then we've got the debate over Reconstruction. All right. So Johnson wants to go easy on the South, just way. Ooh. Hey, do I have the one? Look at that. Do I have the one? Yeah. So there we go. So let's go down here. That's the one where I turned it into a story. So once again, the sharecroppers and tenant farmers are in debt. Freedmen's Bureau is doing what it can for them, but doesn't take away any land. All right, so then you've got Lincoln versus Congress. He's got the 10% plan and Oath of Allegiance and 13th Amendment. Going easy on them. But the Wade Davis bill says you got to have 50% plus the ironclad oath that no Southern leader had ever been a Confederate. So much tougher plan. All right, Johnson's going to take on Congress, and he's going to make these. So he's going to bring back the Southern states while Congress is in recess with the black codes and with the old Confederate leaders, and there's no three-fifths compromise, so they've got more power. All right, Congress, on the other hand, wants to be pro-civil rights and a more radical Reconstruction. So it gets determined by these midterm elections where Johnson makes a bunch of bad speeches. So he's in favor of the, kind of a segregated black code, Old South, whereas the radical Republicans want civil rights for the freed slaves. All right, so the radicals win. They've got a veto-proof majority. They pass the 14th Amendment, civil rights for the freed slaves, citizenship for the freed slaves. States have to respect the Bill of Rights. There's Thaddeus Stevens, who was in the radical in the House of Representatives there. All right, one of the laws they passed was the Tenure of Office Act. Johnson broke it. He fired Secretary of War Stanton. So he gets impeached in the House for breaking that law. Comes one vote short of being convicted in the Senate. At the end of it, so I mean the radicals are thinking a radical will take his place, but they don't get the radical president. They're trying to set him up. These are Republicans that don't like this kind of racist Democrat president. One thing he promised to do was kind of cooperate with Reconstruction if they wouldn't in fact convict him. So he didn't quite get convicted. Okay, but during the end of the Johnson years, during the Grant years, while things are all corrupt up there in the North, you've got the Union occupation of the South. Hey, one interesting question is, what extent was Grant a good president? Because he's taking on the Klan, he's trying to fix the South, at the same time he got all this corruption going on. What's more important, justice or honesty? So maybe that was a question I should have asked y'all. But at any rate, the Union occupying the South, they got to ratify the 14th Amendment. They got Southern states before they become Southern occupied territories, before they become states again, have to promise black suffrage. 15th Amendment is passed after the election of 1868. And so that's the military Reconstruction. Okay, Southerners don't like it. That's the Klan. And the Klan is anti-15th Amendment, plus anti-carpetbagger and scalawag. Grant outlawed the Klan and kind of killed the Klan. All right, let's see, what do I have over here? So there's the Klan right there. All right, so we got to get the carpetbaggers and the scalawags in. So the Panic of 1873 there. Don't I have let's see if we have carpetbaggers and scalawags somewhere. Surly somewhere. Do I not have them? Doesn't look like it. Okay, well, a carpetbagger was a Northerner. I could have sworn I had a slide. There it is. I guess. That ain't great. We just said there was in it. Carpetbaggers were Northerners who were helping with Reconstruction. Scalawags were Southerners. South Scalawags were seen as traitors. So they were more resented than the carpetbaggers were. So the Klan is kind of fighting against carpetbaggers, scalawags, and politically active African Americans. Put those three things together and it spells Republican. So the Ku Klux Klan is an anti-Republican group. All right, so there's the Klan again there. All right, so Grant gets Congress passed a law called the Force Bill and the Ku Klux Klan Act, and so he's kind of killing the Klan for a time. It's going to make a comeback in the 1920s. All right, so you got this bad economy, speculation in railroads. What else? Farms and mines. We saw that in the Gilded Age chapter. Because the economy goes bad, people don't like the Republicans. Also, you've got all this corruption, and we have now seen that the Grant administration was seen as corrupt, not only the carpetbaggers and the scalawags, But, you know, the Whiskey Ring and Credit Mobilier and Fisk and Gould and the corruption taking place in the North. All right, so gradually these Redeemer governments took over. And so that's going to lead to that end of Reconstruction. Let's see what we got. All right, so that's the Compromise of 1877. All right, so I go back. All right, so it's Hayes versus Tilden. Tilden is the Democrat. He wins the popular vote. But there's 3 disputed states, Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina. So they appoint a commission. There's 1 independent, 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans, 1 independent. The independent doesn't want to be the guy who chooses, so he steps down. Congress appoints a Republican. They make Hayes president. The Democrats go along with it on the condition that Reconstruction comes to an end. Okay. Jim Crow laws follow that. Segregation laws, and then in the Gilded Age chapter, we looked at the literacy test and the poll taxes and the literacy test, and the white primaries and the grandfather clause, all the different ways African Americans were prevented from voting, plus the segregation laws. And Plessy versus Ferguson is the court case over the segregated train car, and the doctrine of separate but equal comes along out of that. Okay, let's check the review sheet. All right, and so then we're to Gilded Age, and I think that I have Gilded Age here. All right, hey, we drew a picture of Garfield. All right, so Grant's got a corrupt administration's Gilded Age, meaning, hey, it's shiny on the outside, rotten underneath. So here you have example, Fisk and Gould trying to corner the gold market and use their political connections to make a lot of money. Skip Boss Tweed for a second. Credit Mobilier, you got this construction company overcharging the government to build the Transcontinental Railroad, but they're bribing a lot of congressmen to let them do that, and you know, so they're making a lot of money overcharging the government. What's next? The Whiskey Ring. So that's government workers working for Grant, and they're stealing tax money. All right, so then you go back to Exhibit A for Gilded Age political corruption, and that's Boss Tweed. And he's cheating in elections, and he's running New York City, and he made $200 million off kickbacks from construction contracts in New York City when they're basically building New York City. Thomas Nast is a political cartoonist that draws these pictures of him, and then Tilden, throws him in jail. And the year was like 1868, so then Tilden uses his reputation to run for president in 1876, not quite winning. All right, let's go back to the review sheet. So there's Boss Tweed. All right, so all we have left, oh, look at that, Garfield's assassination. All right, nothing to it. I think you're going to get that right. Let's see if we can go down to it. Stalwarts and half-breeds. Going down there. All right. You got the nativism there. All right, so there he is. Garfield gets elected. Would have been a great president. So author's the author of my book there. So argues the author of my book. He's shot by Guiteau, who wanted a job. So he's shot over the spoils system. So Arthur becomes president, passes the Pendleton Act. Congress passed the Pendleton Act saying, hey, we're replacing the spoil system with the merit system. If you want a government job, you got to take a test. And if we go up here, that's it. We won't worry about Cleveland. We made it to Cleveland and won in exactly one class. We won't worry about the populace. All right, so I'll go right here for our purposes and get rid of that, so that you don't get confused about that. All right, let's go over this way. See how we're doing. See if I can push the right buttons to make this thing work. I think it's this button.